Hello and welcome to Dollars and Cents, the Australia Institute podcast where we're talking about just what the hell is going on in the economy. My name is Eleanor Johnston-Leake, the senior content producer here at the Australia Institute, and as always, I'm joined by our chief economist, Greg Jericho. Hi, Greg.
Hi, Eleanor.
How are we doing today?
Oh, I'm doing really good.
So this week again, Greg, we're going to be diving into the potential effect of a Trump 2.0 presidency on the global economy.
Yeah, last week, listeners will remember we touched on it a little bit and we got really good feedback. So I thought, yeah, let's have a bit more of a deeper dive and actually look at one really big report from the OECD that pointed out just how bad things could be if Trump gets elected.
The biggest problem we have, like with China, is that they're sucking money out of this country. Then the horrible part is they then loan it back to us.
Joe Biden has run up record trade deficits, also known as losses. If India, China, or any other country hits us with a 100 or 200% tariff on American-made goods, we will hit them with the same exact tariff. I have great respect and affection for my friend, President Xi. But I've made clear our trade imbalance is just not acceptable. An eye for an eye, a tariff for a tariff, same exact amount.
I know lots of folks in China. They think we are the dumbest son of a bitches in the world, all right? They think our representatives don't know what they're doing. They laugh at us behind our back.
Yeah, so last week we talked mostly about the huge tariffs on imported goods that Trump is planning on imposing if he gets into office. So that's 60% tariffs on imported goods from China and 10% on imports from the rest of the world. So I'd just like to dive a little bit deeper on into how this would affect Australia. So where did this policy come from? Whose idea was it? Is this like a Project 2025 thing?
It's a weird one, really. Project 2025 is, of course, this really insane plan put forward by the Heritage Foundation in America. Really, really, really right-wing think tank, although there's not much thinking going on. And it outlines all their plans of what they would like Donald Trump to do if he gets back into power. And some of the people behind it are fairly close to Donald Trump. So it's kind of code for this is what Trump will do. So
yeah.
It's not in the Project 2025 document, the 900 pages of insanity that they decided to put down on paper and let everyone read their actual secret plans to destroy the world. Odd move on their part. It seems to come from sort of an historic thing that Trump has always had about imports. Trump always has this weird view that if you import something, that means you're losing or something like that. It's, imports are your country losing, exports are your country winning. It's almost that he really views it in that way. And he had an economics advisor back in his first presidency who went so far as to say imports are bad for the economy because they actually reduce GDP, which is technically true in a mathematical, that's how we work out GDP sense, but it actually is completely stupid to say it.
So why is this not actually bad? Why is this not actually losing like Donald Trump says?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the GDP figures, yes, imports do reduce GDP. We sort of subtract all our imports from GDP. But the reason we do that is because when we import something, we're in a sense buying something. So if let's say Coles or Woolies, or no, probably a better one would be something like Kmart or Big W. They import stuff, or Bunnings import stuff, they sell it. Well, when we buy that thing in Big W, we count that towards GDP. So if we didn't subtract the imports, we'd be double counting. And that's the only reason why technically imports reduce GDP, whereas Donald Trump's...
If you take one step further.
Donald Trump's economic advisor looked at this and go, imports are a negative. If we have fewer imports, then GDP won't go down as much. And it's like, but that means people aren't buying anything in the shops, you idiot. But anyway, Trump has kind of taken that on board and combined it all with this, imports are losing, exports are winning.
Yeah, like it's a game of like Catan
which
not that I'm very good at Catan.
Very much a kind of 19th century view of trade, this mercantile sort of view of trade where it's all about winners and losers and not thinking of actually if we can import something that we wouldn't be able to make as cheap or as good.
Yeah.
That's probably a good thing,
Yeah.
so long as we're also, you have to think about jobs and things like that. But Trump's just like, imports bad. So let's raise the cost of imports 10% for every nation. And because we really hate China, let's raise imports tariffs on that by 60%, which, as I say, would make all imports from China 60% higher.
Yeah.
Which would be very interesting for things like iPhones and that, which are actually manufactured in China. And there's a lot of
I've seen quite a few
things.
actually photos of Trump merch with a Made in China label on it.
It'd be a disaster. Now, for Australia directly, not too bad because, as I mentioned last week, America, it's a sizable export market for us. They get about 3% of all of our exports, which makes it about the 5th biggest, behind India, South Korea, Japan, and China, which gets about a third to 35% of our exports. The worry with this is not that it's going to hurt us directly. It's that it's going to really hurt the Chinese economy.
Yeah.
And we are very dependent on China because of how much we export to China.
Yeah. And in terms of which Australian industries would be affected most, both in terms of our exports to the US and to China, which industries would be affected the most by this tariff policy?
Yeah, I mean, one of the good things here is we've got an OECD report that was done in May that kind of looked at trade wars in a sense. It kind of said, okay, and I think it was because they were like, geez, Trump's probably going to be president. Let's start sounding the warning bells. And they sort of gamed a scenario where trade between the OECD and major non-OECD nations, which is basically China, India, Indonesia, South Africa, and a bit of Russia as well, if the trade between those two kind of blocks reduced 10% because of tariffs, because of all manner of things, what would that do to countries? And the bad news for Australia is we'd be the second most affected.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
For a 10% decrease in trade.
From a 10% in sort of decrease in bilateral trade across the world, essentially, Australia's GDP would go down 1.2%, which is
That's...
And so we come second only to South Korea, whose GDP would go down 1.4%. Because they're right next to China, do a lot of trade with China, so they would be really affected if the trade sort of things go down. But what the OECD did as well was they didn't just do, okay, whole economies, let's look at different sectors. And there are 3 sectors where the drop in output in those sectors would be biggest in Australia, and that is mining.
Yeah.
Our mining output would go down about 5.3%. Which is sizable.
Yeah.
And again, that's because China's going to be hit by this. China's going to be exporting less to America. We're going to be then exporting less of our stuff to China that they use to make stuff that they export to America. The OECD found that with China going down, we wouldn't actually be able to go, oh, well, China's not taking our stuff. Oh, we'll go to India or Indonesia or Europe or something, because everyone's kind of going to be screwed a bit. So there's not going to be another market that can take all this stuff.
Yeah.
So screwed in mining, metal and metal products,
okay,
which again, very linked to mining, sort of, we're talking sort of steel and things like that. That would drop about 2.8%. That's the biggest drop of that industry across the world. And agriculture, our agriculture sector would be hit, goes down 1.8%. That's the biggest drop of any agriculture sector across the world. So you think about agriculture and mining sectors,
they're pretty
getting smashed.
Big industries in Australia.
Not good for Australia.
Yeah.
We come in 3rd worst behind Russia and Brazil when it comes to oil and gas exploration. That's also going to drop, and drop bigger than just about everywhere else in the world, certainly everywhere else in the OECD. So all up, not good. Not good because... not because of the 10% tariff on our stuff, but because we are going to get caught in the tsunami that is hitting China from a 60% increase. So really bad. I was reading this wonderful article in The Economist magazine, which was suggesting, maybe Trump wouldn't be able to do this. He might have to do an executive order or something, and that could be struck down by the courts. And I'm like, I'm not going to put all my faith in the courts. Yeah, I was like, if that's your hope,
Yeah,
we're in
don't
big
worry,
trouble.
guys.
We're
The
in big
Supreme
trouble.
Court
And
has got us.
when I was looking into this, it reminded me of a talk I attended back in 2017, just at the start of the first Trump presidency, where it was a conference here in Canberra, and there was a really excellent economist from Rabobank, an international investment bank, and he did a bit of a gaming scenario of what could happen if a trade war really breaks out. And it very quickly becomes sort of the planet sort of devolving into strong blocks that are all kind of starting to get a bit angsty against each other. There's the old line of when products don't cross borders, armies do. And
that's a good one.
yeah, it's why generally free trade, and it's a bit of a West Wingy kind of line that free trade brings peace, which it doesn't. But, no trade is just one of those extra things where it creates an impetus for hostilities that move outside the economic realm. So it really is not a good sign or not a good thing to contemplate with the Trump presidency.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems pretty unprecedented in modern times for a country this sizable economically, I suppose, to have such an isolationist policy.
Yeah, not since World War II. Pretty
Yeah.
much this would destroy the post-World War II international trade regime, essentially, which has gone through a number of iterations, but behind it all has been, okay, what was happening before World War II? We saw a lot of sort of trade barriers being put up. Even America with trade sanctions against Japan and things like this, and it all became very angsty. And
angsty is a good word to describe the global economy.
World War II, a
pretty
touch
angsty. A bit emo.
Not exactly a chipper time in world history, but it's this case of after World War II, it's like, let's try and get to more freer trade. There was still trade barriers. They progressively came down, and you can certainly argue that trade barriers, perhaps some tariffs came down too much, even in Australia. We kind of were like, let's remove all our tariffs on passenger cars, for example. I wonder if that'll destroy
have any effect on the domestic car manufacturing. Yeah.
And so it's this case of, in theory, no tariffs looks good. In practice, perhaps having especially smaller economies, and not saying Australia is a small economy, we're about the 12th or 13th, depending on how big Russia is going on any particular day. So we're not a small economy, but we are kind of small when you compare us to, say, the production of cars done by Japan or America. So in that situation, maybe a 5 to 10% tariff on things like cars might have helped protect our industry, while also allowing consumers to be able to still import pretty reasonably priced cars. But going 60% against China, that's really unprecedented. And also, one of the things is, if America does this, if you're the EU or if you're Japan or Korea or China, you're going to look at this and go, well, two can play at that game. And that's where it all starts going downhill.
Snowballing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So apart from the huge tariffs, what other economic policies have been floated as potential policies to be enacted if Trump gets in again?
Yeah, these probably won't have as much of an impact on us, but it just really, always a good signpost of what happens in America to think about what might be pursued in Australia, especially by, say, the Liberal Party. Trump wants to again cut company tax, although last time he went from 35% to 21%, which was a massive drop. Here he just wants to go to 20%. I can't think of any reason why he wants it other than he thinks 20% is a nice round number or something. Probably Trump thinks that's more effective or something. He's got a lot of other policies that are designed basically to hand out massive tax cuts to rich people.
Yeah.
Also has a really, on the face of it, seems okay policy, but is actually quite dangerous and terrible, where he's projecting having no income tax on tips. So if you're a waiter and you get a tip, that's not taxed. Sounds nice.
Seems like that, but from what I know, a lot of jobs in the United States are work with tips. So I'm guessing that would be quite a loss in income tax.
Yes, it'd be a loss in income tax, but it'd be even worse for the workers. Because what will happen then is owners will go, okay, you can just get paid in tips now.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, there's a reason why there's been such a fight to raise the minimum wage in America, because their minimum wage is terrible. It is the lowest in the OECD on whatever measure you want to do. It would totally remove that protection, that safety net for people. Business would be like, great, I don't have to pay it. You can just get paid in tips.
Yeah.
And you're not getting taxed on that. So aren't you happy? And it's like, oh, so basically you're really forcing the customers to pay your workers, you know.
Yeah. I can see some customers being like, oh, you don't have to pay taxes. I'll tip you a bit less.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a terrible thing. And what is also worse is that a few tax lawyers in America went, okay, first, this is going to be really impossible to write, because how do you write this in a way that it doesn't make every company perhaps to start classing, like, let's say you're the CEO of a bank and you go, actually, this bonus that we're paying you is actually a gratuity, and so that's tax-free. So actually, yeah, your income no longer is $2 million a year salary plus a $5 million bonus that they do, and that's all subject to tax. No, we're just going to give you a $5 million gratuity, and that's tax-free. Yeah, it's very tricky to actually put into a tax law, oh, this income is taxed, this income is not taxed. But again, it's one of those things, sounds wonderful, but when you pull just one tiny thread, you go, oh, this is going to be really bad.
Yeah.
You know, so it's those type of policies that he's going to pursue that will just make inequality so much worse for America.
I make this pledge to the great people of America. I will end the devastating inflation crisis immediately, bring down interest rates, and lower the cost of energy. We will drill, baby, drill.
38 seconds left. President Trump, will you take any action as president to slow the climate crisis?
So I want absolutely immaculate clean water, and I want absolutely clean air, and we had it. We had H2O.
You know, Anwar in Alaska, it's probably the biggest find anywhere in the world, the size of Saudi Arabia. Some people say, who knows what it is, but it's massive. Ronald Reagan tried to get it, couldn't get it, and that was easier in those days environmentally. They stop it with the environment. You know, the environment is very important to me, and environmental is very important, but, you know, you can't use it to destroy a country.
So obviously, Trump 2.0 could potentially be devastating for not only the US economy, but also the world at large. But it's not just economic policies that could be detrimental to the world. As you mentioned in your column in The Guardian, last Sunday was the hottest day on record for the planet, which followed June being the hottest June on record, making it 13 months in a row of records. So, Greg, how is Trump on climate policy? I'm going to guess not good.
Not good. And yeah, you're right. I mean, June was the hottest June on record. May was the hottest May. April was, you know,
it's really
13 months
stuff.
in a row now. It looks like it's going to be 14 months in a row of records being set. The previous record sort of streak of monthly records, I think, was 8 months in a row. We're now up to 13, so we're getting to almost half a year longer.
Almost doubling the record.
And given that we did have the hottest day on record, it's a pretty good bet July is going to be the hottest July on record. Trump is totally, well, he does say that climate change is a hoax. He tries to walk it back every now and then he just says it again. If you watched his Republican National Convention speech, and God help you if you did, it was 90 minutes of deranged rambling, like literally. It was very low key, to be honest. Didn't actually get much of a reaction because I think most of them were asleep by the end of it. But one of the big lines he got was when he sort of went back to the old line of "drill, baby, drill." You know, very much into and this is something where that Project 2025 thing is very strong on, basically saying climate change is crap. We should be drilling more oil, drilling more gas, just go hard on fossil fuels and amp up production. He's going to totally gut the Environmental Protection Agency, which is already kind of on its last legs because of some Supreme Court decisions that really put its powers in jeopardy. But he's going to gut that, end any subsidies or benefits for sort of renewable industries, even to the point of probably making it impossible for renewable wind farms and things to get approval and things. It's just terrible. And on a broader sense, it's going to really destroy the global agreements on climate change, because any agreement is going to have to exclude America because he's not going to sign up, which means it's not the end, but it makes just things a lot harder. And it means countries like Australia, if we're really smart, would start doing deals with, say, the Californian government, the actual state government, because they will do things, and there will be states in America that will try and basically go around, do an end run around.
Sounds like secession talk to me.
Yeah, well, certainly on climate change, it very much is, and that was kind of what happened during the first presidency, Trump presidency. So if we get a second, it's going to be that, but it just means, again, another 4 years wasted.
Yeah.
And as I say, we're at the point where we're having 13, 14 months in a row of record-breaking temperatures. We don't have 4 years anymore. We've got to be doing things now. And so that's, as I say, we're talking about tariffs and things like that. It's kind of like, yeah, that's bad. A recession definitely would be bad.
Heat death of the planet.
But yeah,
pretty bad.
Climate change is, I kind of think, are we really all that caring about a 10% tariff on Australia? I'm a bit more worried about what he might do about climate change.
Yeah. It does always strike me as ironic that this brand of conservatism is so against conserving the planet itself that we all work and live on.
Yeah, I mean, drill, baby, drill, and everyone should have an oil refinery in their backyard, and God bless America. It really is just... And he's also, he has said to mining or to fossil fuel companies, donate money to me and I'll give you whatever you want. And it's pretty disgusting how upfront he is about all of that.
So obviously, Greg, Australia is tied very closely to the US in terms of defense. We have a huge United States military presence here in Australia, and we're both in the AUKUS agreement alongside the UK for better or maybe probably for worse. Given how closely tied we are to the United States, what does this mean for Australia if Trump succeeds?
Yeah, again, it's exactly like I was saying about climate change. Yes, economic issues are important, but geez, our defences would really be in danger. And I don't want to step on the toes of Emma Shortis's excellent podcast, After America, which you all should listen. It's just brilliant on this topic. But
after you listen to this one.
After you listen to this one.
Yep.
Of course.
Of course.
And also Follow the Money, our other excellent podcast. One of the things and this kind of goes back to trade as well. One of the problems with the AUKUS agreement is it's basically UK and America love it because it's an agreement for Australia to give them billions and billions and billions of dollars and maybe one day perhaps give us something back, but nah. And this goes back to the trade thing. Trump, very transactional. He thinks, if you want to get into agreement with America, especially something to do with defense, you look at how he talks about the NATO alliance and everything. It's all about, okay, what are you paying us? What are you paying me? And, we've already spent $9 billion on AUKUS. $9 billion has been spent by the Australian government for things that...
What have we got to show for that?
Yeah, nothing much. They're building sort of in America a new sort of slipway for shipbuilding, so that one day they might perhaps be able to build enough ships that they can give one of them to Australia.
For $9 billion.
And England, we've given, I think, $4 or $5 billion, I forget which, to basically Rolls-Royce to develop some technology that they can use on their prospective subs, and then they might also maybe, if they're kind, give it to us.
But they'd be a Rolls-Royce sub. That sounds pretty fancy.
So it's all sort of a bit bizarre, and it just sort of highlights, look at the things we're talking about, climate change. They're bad for, he's not going to be good for our economy. Why are we also strapping ourselves to the hip with this AUKUS? It really should be something where the government is going, we made a bad choice.
Yeah. Scott Morrison initially made a bad choice, but we continued to make that bad choice. Yep. Maybe we should stop.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And just finally, going back to the domestic economy, in your column this week, you also talked a bit more about inflation and unemployment. You said that earlier this year, you noted that the unemployment rate was rising at a rate that was close to triggering what is known as the SARM rule of recession, spelled SAHM. So, Greg, what is the Sahm rule?
It's after a US economist, Claudia Sahm, really brilliant economist. She came up with, she was like, GDP is just a terrible measure of recessions. One, it takes too long to work out whether there's been 6 months of negative GDP. It's by the time that's happened, we're already in recession. We need something quicker. What's a quicker measure that every economy does? Unemployment. We get it basically a month after it happened. And what she worked out, she looked at, this was in America, but applies very well to Australia as well, that when the average 3-month average of unemployment rises more than 0.5 percentage points over the minimum of the past year, that kind of means you're headed for a recession.
Yeah.
It's very rare that it goes above that 0.5 percentage point increase and a recession doesn't happen. And right now it's risen about 0.4 percentage points. So we're right on the cusp of it. And it's just, I sort of used it in the column in the sense of, okay, we've got Trump promising to reduce Australia's GDP effectively by 1.2%. Mining's going to get hit. Agriculture's going to get hit. And Australia's economy is already struggling. And the unemployment rate suggests that things are getting close to sort of recessional areas. The last time we were up this high was in that sort of 2014, 2015, 2016 period, which, if you can remember, that was a period when the Reserve Bank was cutting interest rates because they're going, the economy's kind of stuffed. So I was sort of looking and going, okay, one, this is just shows Trump is coming along at a really bad time, but also we've got a Reserve Bank decision coming up in a couple of weeks. Look at what's happening in the labour market. Things are not good. Please don't raise interest rates. And also the sense that, if unemployment keeps going, and we had the ANZ come out this week and suggest that by the end of next year, unemployment might be above 5%. Now, if it goes up that much, I'm sorry, we're in recession town. It's just, there's no way around it. If unemployment gets to over 5% within the next, say, 18 months to 12 months, that's a recession. I'm sorry. And the Reserve Bank hopefully is looking at that and going, you know what, maybe we have hurt the economy enough. And I really hope they kind of look through any inflation figures and go, right now the important thing is actually work and the unemployment rate rather than inflation, which is not skyrocketing. It's a bit higher than we want, but we sure as heck don't want unemployment to keep going up, because what we know from history, and this is why the Claudia Sahm rule of recessions is so good, is we know that once it starts going up that 0.5 percentage point, it generally keeps going.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And so the reason why she came up with this rule is to help governments and central banks to go, okay, when it's getting to 0.5%, act now. Don't wait for 6 months to see what the GDP figures. She's going, act now. Start either cutting rates, putting in some stimulus, do some work now. Otherwise, you're going to be in a recession.
Yeah. Well, praise be to Claudia Sahm.
Praise be.
Let's hope that
very good.
The people of Australia heed her words.
Well, let's at least hope that Michelle Bullock and Jim Chalmers are keeping an eye on what Claudia Sahm is talking about, because, don't wait for GDP. Look at what unemployment is doing.
It's probably all we've got time for today, Greg. Thanks so much.
No worries. Thank you, Eleanor, and thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll be back next week with another Dollars and Cents, and there's going to be some more inflation figures out, so we'll probably be all across that. And hopefully we're not getting more worried about another Trump presidency. This episode of Dollars and Cents was recorded on the 25th of July, and some things may have changed. You can find more information about the impact of trade wars on Australia on my column, Grogonomics, which is on the Guardian Australia site. And for more research, especially some of the great stuff done by Emma Shortis on the impact of a Trump presidency, at our website at australiainstitute.org.au. You can find me on Twitter and Threads. I'm starting to do a lot more on Threads at GrogScammit. And you can find Eleanor on Twitter at EleanorJ_L. Eleanor is spelled ELINOR. The correct spelling.
Like Eleanor Ostrom.
The correct spelling of Eleanor. Our theme music is by Blue Dot Sessions. So see you all next week.
See ya.